Okay, accused of drug activity, man wins back nearly $30,000 stolen by federal agents. He's there. A former shoe shiner had no idea that a trip to the airport with his son would end with DA agents seizing his life savings without charging him for a single crime. It's a process called civil asset forfeiture. Kermit Warren lost his job during the COVID-19 pandemic, but he used the opportunity to turn tragedy into triumph. Mr. Warren decided to take out his life savings and invest in a tow truck for his side business, hauling scrap metal. Yet, the trip from New Orleans to Ohio with his son resulted in Mr. Warren realizing the truck he had sought was the wrong kind. Instead of hauling scrap metal, the truck he had found was designed for hauling heavy equipment. Disappointed but not defeated, Mr. Warren and his son returned home with $28,180 in a pink gift bag, according to the New York Times. However, the father-son duo faced an obstacle when trying to board a flight back home. First, the screeners at the security checkpoint for the Columbus airport asked Mr. Warren about the money. Then they let he and his son walk through. Then just before boarding the flight, a DA agent asked Mr. Warren about the money. Federal agencies' life savings and civil forfeiture. Visibly nervous, Mr. Warren stammered as he tried to explain that he had traveled to purchase a tow truck he no longer wanted. In court papers, federal prosecutors say Mr. Warren wasn't able to give the make or model of the truck, which made the agents suspicious. Panicking, Mr. Warren said he pulled out a badge. That's about the worst thing you can do now. Pull out a badge belonging to his other son, a former New Orleans police officer, claiming he himself was a retired officer. Ultimately, DA agents suspected him of illicit drug activity and confiscated his life savings. Then the agents let he and his son board their flight without charging them for any crimes. I never knew in my whole 58 years as a man in the United States that three DA agents could take a man's money from him that he had worked for and not had committed any kind of crime or was arrested for doing any type of wrongdoing, Mr. Warren said in a video released by his lawyers. How could they just take my money from me like that? In a process called civil asset forfeiture, state and federal law enforcement agents are able to seize and even sell property belonging to people they suspect of being involved in drug activity. In most cases, officers don't have to prove any wrongdoing, even press any charges. Gee, welcome to the United States of America, right? Where you think you live in the land of the free, right? The home of the brave. Government agents use it as a way to raise revenue despite complaints from all. That reminds me of the police in these small towns that have these traffic traps. If you're not familiar with, maybe a tree's hanging low, the branch covering a stop sign, you don't see, you go through. A cop is waiting there to pull you over, give you a ticket. That's how they raise revenue. So this way is even better. You can raise more money this way. For innocent people seeking the return of their property, the American Civil Liberties Union notes that legally regaining such property is notoriously difficult and expensive, with costs sometimes exceeding the value of the property. Critics of the law have also cited a disparity in how it's carried out, with lower income and people of color more likely to be targeted. Yeah, think of all the time the police like to pull over black people for no reason. Meanwhile, civil asset forfeiture allows states to reap lucrative benefits without going through the process of proving someone's guilt. That's not right at all. For instance, between 2000 and 2014, state of Oklahoma earned more than $98 million from silver forfeiture, according to the Institute for Justice, which ranked Oklahoma with a D for its silver forfeiture law. Yeah, I read, I think it was a few months ago, I read an article about a man, a Vietnamese American man. He came here when he was young, but he had this old custom that you don't believe in banks and so forth. And he had a business. I think was selling maybe Chinese food, stuff like that. And he wanted to like join with a like somebody partnership and buy a farm in Oklahoma and grow stuff on. Unfortunately for him, in Oklahoma, I believe you can grow marijuana, right? But he didn't know what he wanted to grow, but he wanted to grow something. But in his past, he had some kind of a background where he had some arrest for marijuana or something like that. So right there, just seeing that was enough, to get him into deep, deep stuff. I believe he was carrying like over $40,000 or more. He and the other guy, I think they were in a rental car, and they were pulled over on one of the interstate highway in Oklahoma. They weren't speeding. Everything was going fine. But the police pulled them over anyway. And you would think that the police supposed to have a reason to pull you over. Well, that's not really true. They pull him over and seize his money. Yeah. Seize all the money. I think he's still going through the process trying to get that money back. So they mentioned Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is a good story because they got over $98 million. And if you can bring all that money in, and by the way, Oklahoma is one of those red states. See, in these red states, they like to talk about, well, we don't raise taxes unnecessarily. We keep taxes low. That's the big thing they got going for them. However, they have all these draconian laws that could seize your property and seize your money. Yeah, you're not gonna raise my taxes. You're not gonna raise taxes like maybe New York or California. you know. But in New York or California, they ain't gonna seize your property like that. you know, the police ain't gonna go around seizing all your money like that because you're driving up the New York State or the New England Thruway to New York State. They ain't gonna be doing that. It's a different mentality here. When you come to these states like California and New York, they're very much more different in how they look at the legal system than these other states that claim that taxes are low and all this stuff like that, but have no problem seizing your property. A public interest firm, the Institute for Justice, represented Mr. Warren in his successful year-long effort to regain his stolen funds. The firm has also sued the DA and the Transportation Security Administration for seizing funds from travelers without probable cause. For their part, Mr. Warren's attorney, Dan Albert, had receipts ready. Federal prosecutors waited until April to officially file a civil asset forfeiture claim. Mr. Warren's attorney provided receipts showing that workers at Buckeye Forklift in Plain City, Ohio, were expecting Mr. Warren's arrival to inspect the trucks. Mr. Auburn also provided proof of Mr. Warren's former employment as a shoe shiner and pay stubs for the last few years, showing his work history. The evidence showed he had a legitimate purpose for his trip to Ohio and a legitimate source for the cash he had earned, Mr. Auburn said. At the end of October, federal prosecutors agreed to return every penny of the stolen funds. It's amazing, Mr. Warren said in an interview on Saturday. I thank God for it because without facts, you can't have truth. I had everything in order. All of my I's were dotted, all of my T's were crossed. We didn't do anything wrong. John Oliver, a comedian and political commentator highlighted the bias inherent in civil forfeiture laws on an episode of his YouTube show last week with John Oliver in 2015. You don't need to be charged with a crime because it's not you that's on trial, it's your stuff, Oliver said on his YouTube trial. Now that's a disgrace. See, and this is the kind of stuff that people who are in the street carrying on about vaccine and vaccine mandates and how the government shouldn't be imposing this. This is what they should be talking about, that the government can seize your damn property like that and not even charge you with a crime and just say, well, we suspect you being a drug dealer. The prosecutors in this case, they could have easily called up the business where the man was going to buy the trucks from and ask if he was going to really buy a truck from them and check his work history, check his all that they could have done, and they failed to do it because they didn't want to do it, because they figure if you're stupid enough and you can't come up with the right lawyer or somebody to represent you, well, there goes your money, and that's how you lose out on justice in America, if you don't stand up for your rights, and that's what happens to some people. And unfortunately, some people who may have like a sudden past or what have you, they're more at a disadvantage because right away they want to accuse you of something, even though you're trying to do something different to improve your life. Right away, they try to drag that in and try to say that. The thing what he did with pulling out that badge of his son, who was a former cop, that was a stupid thing to do. He got nervous. He pulled out a badge, said he's a retired police officer. So that got him into deep doo-doo by pulling that stuff. But he was nervous. But he shouldn't have to do that. They should never seize his money to begin with. You know? In the United States of America, something like that should not be happening in any time.